They slapped a violation notice on my door like they owned the place. Remove the boat immediately or face penalties. It reads signed in bold by the Homeowners Association. What they didn't know, that lake they were claiming rights over the one they'd been hosting fishing tournaments on. Building docks around, sending out HOA newsletters about wasn't theirs. It was mine. All of it. Let me take you back. I moved out here about a year ago, after inheriting property from my late uncle. I was surprised when I first saw it 40 acres of mostly untouched land, with a winding gravel driveway that opened up to a modest log home and, most impressive of all, a glittering, secluded lake stretching far beyond what I initially thought were the property lines. At first I thought there must be a mistake. No way the lake came with the house. But when I got the deed there, it was, in writing, plain as day. Full ownership of Lake Warren. No shared access. No HOA oversight. Easements. No loopholes. I even had water rights and shoreline control. It was all mine. I didn't think much of it until I noticed the fishing club at first. I thought it was just a few locals enjoying the water. They'd show up in groups, middle-aged men in polos, women in visors with coolers, kids with rods. I figured, hey, no harm in letting them fish a little, but then I saw the signs, HOA fishing tournament this Saturday. Members only access, HOA badge required. They had posted their own signs, on my land, on my lake, so I asked around. Turns out, for the past decade, the HOA had used the lake as their personal recreational spot. No one had questioned it because the previous owner, my uncle, was a recluse, never spoke to neighbors, never came to HOA meetings, so they assumed it was abandoned public land. That assumption came crashing down the day they told me I was breaking the rules. I had parked my aluminum fishing boat by the edge of the lake, right near my dock. Nothing flashy, just a 14-footer, with an old outboard motor. The next morning, I got the letter. Apparently, my boat obstructed the aesthetic value of the common area and violated shared lake usage guidelines. Shared common area. They had no clue. I walked into the HOA meeting the following Thursday with a stack of papers in a manila folder. The room went quiet when I entered, like they knew something was off. I let them speak first. Their president, a guy named Rick, explained how I was disturbing the peace. He said I needed to apply for lake usage approval and pay an annual recreational permit. That's when I laid the folder on the table. The deed, the surveyor maps, the county filings, the water rights document. Everything. Rick looked at, over and turned pale. He cleared his throat, then tried to pivot. Well, even if the lake is technically yours, it's still surrounded by HOA land, so our members have historical access. That counts for something. That's when I hit them. With the legal clause, no adverse possession, no implied easement. Use of the land, even over time, meant nothing without written permission. And I had never given any. I told them they had 72 hours to remove all their signs, gear, and makeshift docks from my lakefront tour. I'd begin legal proceedings for trespassing and unauthorized use of private property. They were speechless. That weekend, I watched from my porch as the HOA's fishing club dismantled their floating dock. One by one, they carried coolers, canopies, and lawn chairs back to their trucks. The looks they gave me, pure disbelief. And then came the backlash. Flyers started appearing around the neighborhood, claiming I was stealing community resources. People unfriended me online. Someone egged my truck. But none of that mattered, because now the lake was quiet. Peaceful mine. I restored the shoreline, planted native reeds, cleaned up trash they'd left behind. I started fishing again, alone, like my uncle used to. Some evenings, I'd take the boat out as the sun sets behind the pines. No yelling, no tournaments, no powerboats racing across. The water. Just me, the lake, and the sound of nature reclaiming its rhythm. Eventually, some neighbors came around. A few even apologized. Turns out, most of them had no idea the HOA had overstepped. They were just following rules that were never theirs to begin with. I don't hate the HOA. I hate what power unchecked can become. They assumed authority without ever earning it, ever thinking someone would question them. But I did. And if there's one thing this whole experience taught me, it's that knowledge, especially legal knowledge, is the strongest tool a landowner can have. So the next time someone tries to tell you where you can and can't park your boat, make sure they're not standing on your shoreline when they do it. For a while, things went quiet. No more HOA letters. No more uninvited guests. It felt like I had finally drawn a line in the sand. They knew not to cross it, but I should have. Known better. About 2 weeks after the fishing club disbanded, I noticed something strange. Tire tracks down by the far end of the lake where my trail camera didn't quite reach. Then, late one night, I saw flashlights moving through the trees. Not many, 2, maybe 3 people. Trying to stay low, I didn't confront them. Not then. I just watched. The next morning, I hiked down to that far corner of the lake, and what I found made my blood boil. A brand new dock, small, roughly built, no permits, just plywood and plastic barrels for flotation, fresh boot prints in the mud, fishing line tangled in the reeds and taped to a wooden post, a laminated sign, HOA member access point temporarily closed for repairs. They were sneaking in under my nose, trying to outweight me, trying to rebuild what I had shut down. But what they didn't realize is that I was already ahead of them. After the first incident, I had hired a land surveyor to redraw the property boundaries and install updated markers with GPS coordinates approved by the county, filed with the registry. I'd also spoken to a lawyer, just in case things escalated. And now, they just gave me exactly what I needed: trespassing on private property. Deliberate, premeditated, with signage. I documented everything: photos, coordinates, timestamps, and then I filed a formal cease and desist with the HOA's legal representative. I didn't send it as a courtesy letter this time. It came directly from my attorney's office with evidence, maps, and a threat of a full lawsuit if one more board member so much as stepped on my land. The response? Silence for 5 days. Then, an emergency HOA meeting. It wasn't public, but I had a neighbor who kept me in the loop. Word was, the board was panicking. Apparently, some of the longtime members were furious with Rick and the rest of the leadership. Why? Because they found out the HOA had been collecting dues for lake access privileges for over 10 years, for a lake they didn't own. And I wasn't the only one ready to fight back. A class action lawsuit began forming this time against the HOA leadership itself. Some members wanted refunds. Others wanted resignations. And one woman, a retired civil engineer, began investigating every property the HOA claimed to control by the end of that month. The president had stepped down, but the final nail in the coffin came shortly after, when I discovered that the HOA had not only built unauthorized structures on my land, they had submitted false claims to the county property office years ago, subtly redrawing plat maps to imply the lake was part of community green space. That was fraud. To the county board, they were not happy. The HOA's blanket authority over the area was suspended pending a full audit. They were forced to take down every sign, pay restitution to members who had been misled, and issue a formal written apology to me filed publicly. The dock removed the fishing club, disbanded for good, secure for the first time. In decades, Lake Warren was truly private again, not just on paper, but in reality. The quiet returned, not just to the shoreline, but inside me too. I finally felt like I wasn't just guarding my inheritance. I was honoring it, and now, when I sit at the end of my dock, casting a line into the still water, there's a strange satisfaction in knowing the truth came out not with shouting, not with threats, but with facts, patience, and resolve. Sometimes, the fight isn't loud. It's slow, steady, relentless, and sometimes, the system that was meant to protect the many gets hijacked by a few, but not this time, because this time, the lake fought back, and it remembered exactly who owned it. So if you're ever told by a clipboard-wielding neighbor that you are the problem, check the paperwork. Stand your ground, because you never know. You might not just own the boat, you might own the whole damn lake. The weeks that followed were quiet, unnervingly quiet. No letters, no strange cars. No shadowy figures sneaking down to the lake. I should have felt victorious, relieved even, but part of me couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Don't dismantle a decade-long power grab without a little fallout. And sure enough, it came. One crisp morning, I received an envelope. Not from the HOA this time, from the County Environmental Office. Inside was a notice complaint of environmental disruption on protected wetland. Investigation pending. Penalties may apply. I froze. Protected wetland. What wetland? The lake. Had been in my family for generations. Never once had it been designated or zoned as protected, and I would have known because I had already researched it thoroughly during the ownership dispute. But this was something else. I started digging. 2 hours later, I found it. A newly filed petition submitted anonymously requesting reclassification of Lake Warren and its surrounding area as a sensitive habitat due to recent disruptive activity by the current landowner. They were trying to tie my hands. If the lake became protected, I'd lose usage, rights, no boating, no fishing, no clearing vegetation. It wouldn't matter that I owned it. The government would oversee it. A clever move. Desperate, but clever. Contacted my lawyer immediately. He requested a temporary injunction on any environmental decision-making until we could present our evidence. The case was scheduled for review within 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks, they were war. Not physical, but social. I was painted as the villain. The guy who hated nature, bullied the neighborhood, ran the fishing club into the ground. Online, posts started popping up. Man tries to privatize community lake. HOA victimized by rogue landowner. Photos of my house. Of me, out on the water, taken without permission. But I kept calm. I knew the truth. And more importantly, I had the documents. The court day came fast. I stood in front of a bored-looking county commissioner, across from 2 HOA board members and a so-called environmental consultant they'd brought along. They opened with emotion. Claims that my boating stirred up sediment, scared off waterfowl, and that the lake's ecosystem had never been more unstable. Then I stepped up. I handed over satellite imagery, time-stamped, historical water quality reports. The environmental survey I had ordered myself weeks before this, started certified by an actual biologist. It showed the opposite. The lake was in the healthiest condition it had been in years. Vegetation had returned where old docks had been removed. Fish counts were stable. There were no invasive species, and the so-called consultant had no credentials. Turns out, he was Rick's cousin. The commissioner didn't even need a recess. He denied the petition on the spot, against filing false claims in the future. As for me, I walked out of that room knowing it was finally done. No more sneak attacks. No more backdoor legal plays. They'd tried to bully me with fake rules, then smear me with fake stories, then bury me in fake science. But truth has roots, and when it's planted deep enough, it doesn't matter how many times someone tries to cover it up. Today, the lake is quiet again. More than that, it's respected, not feared, not fought over, just left alone. Occasionally, I get a friendly wave from neighbors. A few of them even stop by to chat. One older gentleman told me, "You didn't just win a fight. You reminded people we don't have to roll over every time a board member waves a rulebook." That stuck with me, because this story, it was never just about a boat or a lake. It was about standing your ground, about knowing what's yours, and about refusing to let someone take it just because they act like they're in charge. So to anyone watching this who's ever faced an overreaching HOA, a nosy neighbor, or someone trying to bully them off their own land, I hope my story reminds you, you don't have to be loud, you don't have to be aggressive, you just have to be right and prepared. Because no matter how many people show up with rules, threats, or lies, they can't rewrite what's in ink. They can't undo what's recorded in deeds. And they definitely can't claim a lake that was never theirs to begin. With asterisk, months passed. The water was still, the air was light. And for the first time since I'd moved in, I felt like the land was breathing easy again. No signs nailed to trees, no late-night flashlights creeping along the edges, no gossip at the gas station about the troublemaker by the lake. Peace. But not just mine, the ecosystem was flourishing. Without the weekly trampling from 20 pairs of feet, the banks began to rebuild. Ducks started nesting on the east shore, where the reeds had once been stomped flat. The water, once murky from all the stirred-up sediment and crystal clear, by early summer you could stand on the dock and see fish weaving between the rocks. It was a slow healing, but it was happening, and I watched it every day, still. A part of me stayed alert, because history has a habit of repeating itself, especially when egos are involved. Then one day, I got a call, not from the HOA, not from a lawyer, from a local real estate agent. She introduced herself politely, then asked if I had considered listing the property. I told her firmly that I hadn't. She hesitated, then said she had a serious cash buyer who was interested in acquiring land near the lake, especially something with full water rights. That was no coincidence. I asked who the buyer was. She said she couldn't disclose, but that he was well connected in the area and already in talks with the HOA about future recreational development. I hung up. It was clear now. They couldn't take the lake. They couldn't block my use of it, so they were going to try and buy it out from under me. I wasn't going anywhere, but they didn't stop there. Within a few weeks, I got letters from 2 different survey firms, both requesting permission to perform boundary verification assessments on the east and north sides of the lake. Those weren't disputed areas. They had already been verified during the court proceedings. It wasn't about checking facts. It was about pressure. Each letter came with a nice cover note talking about opportunities and future planning, and making sure all stakeholders are aligned. I sent them all back unopened, marked return to sender, private property. But that was the moment I realized this wasn't about a boat anymore. It wasn't even about the lake. It was about control. They couldn't stand the idea that someone outside their systems, someone who wasn't part of their weekend social club, or their little golf cart council had something they couldn't regulate, share, or sell. I became a threat the moment. I didn't need them, so I did the one thing they feared most. I shared the truth. I put everything in writing. The full history, the fraudulent maps, the fishing clubs, collapsed the environmental abuse, the petty legal traps. The survey, scams, all of it. Then I created a simple website, lakewarrentruth.com. No drama, no attacks, just facts. I uploaded all the legal documents, the court decision, the original deed, the conservation reports, even audio clips of phone calls where HOA members practically admitted they knew they were overstepping, and I sent it, anonymously, to every household in the neighborhood. I left a simple note: you deserve to know the full story. That's when the tide turned. Within days, my inbox exploded. Messages from people I'd never met. Some were angry, some embarrassed, some grateful. Turns out there were a lot more folks in the neighborhood who had been quietly bullied by the HOA. People who had been fined for planting native plants told they couldn't park in their own driveways, threatened for building a chicken coop or painting their door the wrong shade of brown. They'd all stayed quiet. Until now, my little website became a catalyst. Soon, a movement formed, neighbors banding together, questioning policies, demanding transparency, attending meetings together instead of alone. They started reviewing the HOA's finances, found some discrepancies, forced a full audit. Guess what they found? Over $18,000 in miscellaneous recreational funds had been spent over 3 years, with no receipts. Most of it went toward fishing club operations. Rick, the former HOA president, he'd been pocketing dues, using them to fund tournaments, buying equipment, even paying that fake environmental consultant under the table he was. Investigated, fined, barred from serving on any community board ever again. As for the HOA itself, didn't dissolve, but it changed new leadership, new bylaws. All financials. Made public mandatory consent for any property-level involvement. No more courtesy memberships, no more backdoor deals. And me. I stayed. People wave now, stop to chat by the fence, bring their kids by 2 feed ducks near the public walking trail outside my property line, where they're welcome. The lake? Still private, still mine, but respected. I even set up a small observation dock on the far end, not for fishing, for quiet, for watching, for remembering, because this wasn't just a fight over water. It was a reminder of something deeper, that ownership isn't just about holding a title. It's about stewardship, responsibility, respect for what you have, and the willingness to protect it even when everyone else tells you to sit down and follow the rules. Sometimes the rules are wrong. Sometimes the system is the problem, and sometimes all it takes to fix it is one person willing to stand alone long enough for others to see they're not really alone after all. So yeah, they demanded. I moved my boat, tried to claim my lake, tried to silence me, buy me, break me, but I didn't move. And now they know. You don't mess with a man who owns the lake. Asterisk. Summer drifted into fall. The trees turned gold and crimson. The lake mirrored the sky like glass, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I began to live, not just defend. It was quiet, but it wasn't lonely. Not anymore. People started visiting, not the old fishing club types, those days were gone, but the ones who had once watched from behind blinds. The quiet neighbors, the ones who didn't like conflict but respected truth. They came by with apple pies, questions, sometimes, just to sit by the lake and breathe. One woman, Elaine, told me she'd lived in the neighborhood for 22 years. Said her late husband had always told her something was off about the HOA. They made people feel small, she whispered. They told us we signed papers when we didn't, told us what we could do with our gardens, fined us for wind chimes. She laughed, but it was a tired laugh, not bitter, resigned. I wish he'd lived to see what you did. Then she just stood there, tears in her eyes, looking at the water like it was something sacred. It hit me then. This wasn't just about land or power. It was about liberation, about reclaiming the kind of quiet dignity that gets stripped away. A little at a time, when no one speaks up, that lake had become more than a boundary line. It had become a symbol. And so I decided to do something different, something the old me paranoid, tired, battle-worn never would have considered. I opened it, not to everyone, not permanently, but once a month I hosted what I called Lake Days. No fishing tournaments, no sponsors, just an open gate. A place for families to bring a picnic, sit by the shore, let their kids learn to skip stones like I did when I was young. The first one, I expected 5 people, maybe 10. 50 showed up. They brought food, folding chairs, dogs on leashes. A local guitarist played under a tree. Someone set up a hammock between 2 pines. Kids waded in the shallows, laughing, and no one asked to take anything. They just wanted to be near it. After they left, the place was spotless, cleaner than before. That's when I realized something else. Not everyone who follows rules does it because they agree with them. Some just don't know what else to do. But when one person stands up and draws a line, others suddenly remember how to draw their own. I wasn't a symbol. I wasn't some hero. I was just a man with a lake, a deed, and enough stubbornness to outlast the ones who tried to rewrite the truth. But in the end, maybe that's all it takes. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. Rick never showed up again. Word had it, he sold his house and moved to counties over. Good riddance. But a few of his old allies still circled. They kept their distance, but every once in a while, one would leave a snide comment on the neighborhood forum. Still can't believe we let that guy ruin the fishing club. Hope he's enjoying his little kingdom. They never used my name, but I knew, and I didn't care, because the only thing louder than their bitterness was the silence of their failure. They had all the power, all the influence, all the connections, and still a man with an old boat and a stack of yellowed documents outmaneuvered them all, not with force, not with threats, with truth, with patience, with relentless, quiet persistence. And that's how real victories are won. Walk the shoreline every morning, same boots, same thermos of coffee. Sometimes I see deer drinking near the trees. Other times, just fog drifting low over the water, making everything feel like a forgotten dream. And every time I reach the dock, I stop. I sit, and I remember everything it took to get here. The boat, the letter, the meeting, the lies, the lawsuit, the silence, the storm, all of it, and then I look out across the still water, the surface glowing gold in the morning light, and I say quietly, not today. Not today will they take this. Not today will they twist what's mine. Not today will they win through silence. This life is defended now, and not just by paperwork, by people, by memory, by me. And if you're still watching, if you've followed this story from that first knock at the door to this moment by the shore, then maybe you understand what I'm about to say. No one has the right to take what you've earned, not through manipulation, not through intimidation, not through fine print or whispered threats. Know your rights, know your worth, because sometimes all it takes is one calm man in the storm to remind everyone else. The land doesn't belong to those who shout the loudest. It belongs to those who stay. And I'm not going anywhere. Subscribe for more stories like this, true ones, the kind with mud on their boots and fire in their hearts. Because out here, the lines aren't drawn in ink. They're carved in earth, anchored in truth, and guarded by those who remember what was almost taken, but wasn't.